Welcome to Keeping the World Company on Think Tech Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. Today we're going to talk about maybe you want to live in Russia. Perhaps you want to move to Russia. It may be coming sooner than you think. Our co-host for the show is Tim Apicella. Our guest for the show, our esteemed guest for the show, is Manfred Henningsen. Welcome to you both. Thanks for being here. You know, we need to see what Trump and Musk and their friends are doing here domestically so we can see the comparison between life in these United States and life in Russia and how they may be getting closer. Clearly, the U.S. is moving toward the Russian model under Trump and Musk and friends. Call it dictatorship. Let me start with you, Tim. Do you feel that we do not have the same kinds of life in these United States as we used to have? Do you feel that we are heading toward a quality of life that's more like Russia than we remember?
We see signs of mimicking Russia, and that is, for me, is the attempt to control media, attempt to control media legacy companies, the attempt to corral the unregulated media of social media, X, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. So from that standpoint, an attempt to control media is very Moscow-ish, Russian-ish. Back in the days of the old Soviet Union and currently under Putin's regime now. I mean, in Moscow, you just say the word war, and that could mean detention. We're not there. We're not there yet, but it starts in slow baby steps. And those baby steps are threats to media companies that their license may be pulled because they said something unflattering about Donald Trump and maybe some of his court cases and some of the indictments and the felonies that he's committed. We see it in the form of Elon Musk controlling X. We see it in the way of Mark Zuckerberg saying he's not going to do fact checking anymore. So it's the Wild West. Anything goes. Propaganda runs amok. So from that standpoint, I'd have to say we're on a very slow step to control the media, and certainly in any fascist state or dictatorships that control at the helm, the media is the first thing you need to control. You need to control the message, and you do so with propaganda, with lies, disinformation, and so to answer your question, a little bit.
Yeah, it reminds me of the frog in the water. If you throw the frog in boiling water, he'll jump right out. But if you throw him in room temperature water and raise the temperature little by little, step by step, as you said, he doesn't realize what's happening. Do you think people realize what's happening?
No, they don't. I think it takes, Jean's always on the show, and she said she's been studying fascism for years and years. So you have to be a student of studying history, studying, different techniques that governments have, dictators have. You and I have discussed the properties of propaganda and what to look for. What is the nature of propaganda? What are the tell signs of propaganda? I don't think most people are kind of, their radars aren't affixed to that. To kind of shift a little bit, as preparing for the show, I kept being reminded of what Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, said back in 1956. And he said the following: "We will take America without firing a shot. We do not have to invade the USA. We will destroy you from within." How prophetic. And I feel that those words are becoming more prophetic as we unravel as far as the attempts to loosen the rule of law, attacks on the Constitution, attacks on the judicial system, attack on the FBI and security agencies, intelligence agencies, attack on the media, attack on even our education system. We know that you can propel an autocracy by teaching the young that which you want them to learn. Forget about real history. Let's teach them a new history, the history of Donald Trump and his legacy and his regime.
Manfred, a few weeks ago, you recommended Navalny's book, Patriot, his memoirs. And I thought that was very interesting as a kind of description of what life was like, especially for somebody who spoke truth to power in Russia. So can you give us a handle on what, according to Navalny, what life is like in Russia now?
We are talking about an autocratic regime with incredible control mechanisms. But I do not think, as I have always resisted these fascist comparison with Nazi Germany, I am somewhat hesitant to use Russia's Putin as a model we are heading toward. Look, it's not only that we are not there yet, but I think you have these beginning signs of an opposition in the United States. When you're looking at the churches, it was not only the bishop, the Episcopalian bishop in Washington. You have now the Catholic bishops from all over the country going against Trump. You have the Protestant churches going against Trump. The legal system still operates. I mean, all of the holding orders that are issued by judges are still working. So please, we have been now 3 weeks in the Trump regime and the Trump-Musk regime, and I think let's not become too depressed. I mean, I am depressed, yes, but I'm not. At this point, I'm not throwing in the towel and believe, that America has gone over the edge and has become like Putin's Russia. I mean, one thing that I find interesting, that's why I mentioned the churches. You have this division between the Russian Orthodox Church with the Patriarch in Moscow and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church with the Patriarch in Kiev. Now, why Pope Francis had something against the separation of the two churches, why he criticized the Ukrainian, I do not understand. But I mean, you have this opposition of Christian churches in the United States. You do not have that in Russia. The Orthodox Church of Russia has behaved really like a support system of incredible proportions. I mean, that happened also during the Soviet era. Despite Stalin's anti-Christian attitude, the Orthodox Church never criticized Stalin. I mean, and so for that reason, you have here a source of opposition in the United States that goes also against the evangelicals. So please look for all of these signs of opposition that you have. We still have some newspapers, like the New York Times, that prints every day very, very critical assessments of the moves by Trump. And our local newspaper, reprints a lot of these or preprints a lot of these articles, because the New York Times arrives a day later. So you can already read the articles that appear in the New York Times. So you still have, a level of resistance. And I think you have slowly being emerging, an opposition, a live opposition within the Democratic Party.
You know what? I'd like to go back to the beginning and ask you to look through the lens of Navalny's book and tell us what life is like in Russia. We can't do this analysis properly unless we understand what goes on. I mean, for example, he describes about lies and that everyone expects the government to lie, like about Chernobyl. He has a lengthy discussion of Chernobyl and how the government lied and put people at risk. and various other elements of Putin's government, the Russian government, for that matter, the Soviet government, were deeply ingrained in Russia. So I would like to know from you, as you understand it and as you found through Navalny's book, what life is like. You don't have to make a comparison. We'll make the comparison here, but just tell us what life is like.
What you have there is an autocratic regime that tried to suppress all opposition and successfully, Navalny became Navalny because in that period, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in early 1890s, you have a free space in which he could operate. And he did, and he created an opposition movement that became scary to Putin, Yeltsin's successor, when he declared his candidacy. So then the state moved in with all of its oppressive agencies and moved against him, undermined his movement. It became dangerous for Putin. Now, I don't have to go into the detail describing a dictatorship, for God's sake. We are not there. And I don't think we will reach that point. So what you are looking for is, I think, as misplaced as what Jean was always talking when she was looking to Adolf Hitler as the future. We are not there. And I don't think we will move into either of these scenarios that you are bringing up in comparison. We are here in the process of seeing, a republic becoming dismantled from within, but you have still forces of opposition, not only the churches, but politicians, judges. So please look for the positive signs that are still there.
Manfred, I have a big spot in my heart for you, but may I take issue with something that I feel somewhat troubling, and that is we've only had 3 weeks, and we've had more action out of the executive office in 3 weeks to dismantle how the federal government works, including the judicial system. And I feel that we haven't seen enough dissent. When do you muster dissent? Do you wait until it's midway and it's the camel's nose is under the tent? Or do you keep the damn camel out of the desert in the first place? So when do you muster dissent? And I feel that we've seen enough in 3 weeks to certainly not only sound the alarm bell that something amiss is happening, but something to be done about it. And that is not only through the judicial system, but through the fourth estate, which is called the media. And last but not least, the people. The people's ability to dissent via social media, the media, in the streets, on the airwaves, and I don't think we've seen enough of it. So I do agree with Manfred that we're not there yet, but the operative point is let's make sure we don't get there. Look at what happens to the media already. We had Jennifer Rubin, Washington Post, extraordinary editorial column. She's migrated away because restrictions were being placed on her, no doubt. We had the Washington Post say, we're not going to endorse any candidates. First time for many, many decades. We've had great journalists like Jim Acosta given the midnight hour to basically silence him through a lack of audience. We've had the LA Times do the same thing as the Washington Post as far as no endorsements. We've seen a migration of media companies, legacy media personalities migrate to social media, to podcasts, to get the word out on what's really going on, because the owners of these media companies are starting to set the screws down. They're putting the screws down on journalists. So at what point do you say, uh-oh, I see signs of what an autocrat would do, and let's talk about it, let's dissent early, not later.
Manfred, you wanted to respond?
Yes. there are two things that I think we have to remember. Trump was elected by a majority, as slim as it was, of the American people. So what you have here is, an approval of what he has done in the first 3 weeks. Now, we didn't vote for him.
Wait, Manfred. They voted for something else. They didn't vote for what he's doing, and they have not approved what he has done in the past 3 weeks. That's not a true statement.
And I'd like to address this too. Sorry, Manfred, to take a pot shot at you. And I know this isn't a college debate, but just because you win the popular vote in the Electoral College does not give you license to undermine the rule of law and the Constitution of the United States. Sorry.
That brings me to the second point. This is a republic. It is a presidential system, not a parliamentary system. And I am waiting, now for 3 weeks already, for the Democratic Party, which has only lost. I mean, it's not a majority. I mean, it was not a disaster for them. They're still alive, and they have not been arrested. I'm waiting for the Democratic Party to wake up, to articulate what you are and Jay are talking about. And I think it will happen. Now, I find the responses of the churches, Protestant and Catholic in the United States, remarkable. That they have, and I'm sure a lot of their believers were Trump voters also, but they didn't care, the churches. They went ahead anyway. So for that reason, I am waiting for the political opposition to actualize and articulate its resistance to what you have beautifully described, and Jay also, what has happened during the last 3 weeks. But I must admit, I'm still insisting on the notion that we have not reached the point, that Russia reached. I mean, look, Russia was a dictatorship since 1917 or 1922, up the end of the Civil War, but it had a pause, where it could become a democratic society under Yeltsin. Now, Yeltsin then handed it over to Putin, and you have, in a way, I mean, there are messages from Yeltsin around 1998, in which he says, we will become this form of democracy that we have here. We will become the model, and we will be victorious over the United States and Western Europe. So you have had this strategy there for some time, but I do not think that neither in Europe, but we can talk about afterwards, or in the United States has been successful.
Remember that our show is entitled, Perhaps You Want to Live in Russia. It may be coming sooner than you think. And I am interested in looking at Russia and looking at the things that are happening in the US that may suggest that we are moving toward the Russian model. But Tim, you had some.
If we're waiting for the Democratic Party to grow a backbone, to grow a spine, to stand on its own two hind legs, then Nikita Khrushchev's in 1956, "We will bury you," will happen much faster than waiting for the Democratic Party to respond to the last 3 weeks.
Let me go to my understanding about what's going on in Russia. There's no freedom of speech. There's no opportunity to push back. The one journalistic organization, Medusa, had to leave the country. They were finished. They could not be an independent press. There is no independent press in Russia. There is no freedom of speech in Russia. You want to try that, you'll wind up in the Gulag for decades. Finally, there are a lot of arrests that are vengeance arrests, just because you said something or did something or you oppose Putin. you wind up getting tried in a phony court and getting a phony sentence that lasts for years and years. He is all powerful. There are no civil liberties. You can go to jail for nearly anything. It's all out of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, or 1984, or Animal Farm. We're talking about Franz Kafka. We're talking about Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn. And we're talking, of course, about Alexei Navalny. With incomprehensible, lawless prosecutions and persecutions and long prison sentences in the Gulag, and actually Guantanamo reminds me of that, because that's where Guantanamo is going. Finally, you have the pariah effect. Russia is a pariah. It's an isolationist pariah in many ways. It's bent on destroying American hegemony. Trump is doing the same thing. He's bent on destroying our global trade, our reputation, our diplomacy, and domestically our workforce, our economy, our social safety net, and healthcare system. If you do all of that, if you destroy all of that, you might say, gee, that looks a lot like what Russia is. We are sinking to the bottom of the Western hierarchy, just as Russia has been sinking to the bottom of the global hierarchy. We're a country focused on deportation, on taking more territory. Does that sound like Ukraine? More interested in making enemies than making friends. Does that sound like Putin? And thus ultimately in making war. Watch. We're talking about ending the benefits and rights and freedoms of our citizens by a government that, and listen, habitually lies to its people. Nobody can deny that Trump has been lying to us for as long as he's been in office, with black lies, with outrageous lies, and perverting public opinion. So anyway, when I looked at Navalny's book, I saw a place that wasn't that far away from where we are now. A country of oligarchs, of bigotry, vengeance, corruption, huge corruption, kleptocracy. We're showing the same signs. Russia has had those signs for a while. There is no representative democracy in Russia, and it's not clear that the power will ever be given to or returned to the people. How different is that from what we see going on here? The churches and some of the clergy can say nice things, and some of the press can write articles, but the drift, the direction of it all is not in that direction. As Tim says, the Democratic Party isn't doing very much. The founders tried to give us an enlightenment with checks and balances to protect our lives, our liberties, our fortunes, our sacred honor. We are in the process of throwing that away. And if we throw that away, what country do we look like? It's a tragic misunderstanding, a tragic understatement to say the country is abandoning what the founders forged for us and what we fought and died for. It's much worse than that. It's a monumental shame. So, Tim, let me ask you to respond to that. Do you agree, disagree? How would you support it or deny it?
We should be shouting from the rooftops of what we've been witnessing for the last 3 weeks. These are very bold, draconian moves under the guise or the smokescreen. These are executive power authorities. I think we should be very concerned, and we're not there yet, that we may be heading into a constitutional crisis, that Donald Trump may ultimately ignore the expressed court decisions, injunctions, the rule of law, and if he ignores those and carries on as he is continuing to do on a couple of areas like funding, we now are going to be forced into constitutional crisis. That is what I would call a power grab. And the President of the United States is looking to do just that, I think, in my opinion. So your words are not misplaced, Jay. I just worry about the fact that our population is not energized to the point where maybe they should be energized. And that's why I think I take issue with Manfred and some of his approach or his viewpoints about we're not there yet. And you're right, we're not. And I agree wholeheartedly with that. But, the time to muster is the time to, when the enemy is approaching your borderline, not when they're 10 miles within your borderline. And I feel that authoritative, autocratic desires are now at the borderline and more than happy to breach that and undermine our government as we know it. And, again, the United States has had government conflicts, with its people for the last 200 plus years, but not to the extent where a president is the ringleader of pushing it. Certainly we had issues with FDR and the internment of Japanese American citizens. That was just awful. Yet it happened. And if you want to talk to any of those folks, there's books been written about it. There are many survivors still alive. It doesn't feel good. And I don't care if that's 1942 or now it's 2025. It's an infringement on someone's rights, and pushing the rule of law aside isn't going to feel well to a lot of Americans. And that means Trump Americans, MAGA Americans. So I just say, be careful. And your words are very spot on, Jay.
Well, one thing I want to add before we give Manfred a chance to respond here is that Russia is a dark, sad, mean-spirited world. You can't talk freely. You're worried that somebody will tell on you and they will come and get you. The KGB, the FSB, they're going to come and get you. You can't, there's no freedom. Freedom, it's an operative word there. They don't have it. And, I suggest that some of the things that are happening with freedom of speech and civil liberties, with the way the government works, the way, Trump is controlling everything and dismantling all of the humanitarian arrangements and the regulatory arrangements and the health arrangements. My goodness gracious, we are on a declining track, and we are heading headlong into a very similar situation. Dark, sad, mean-spirited. And there may be people who still believe in him. I know there are. They say they are because, like Manfred suggests, they're operating on the basis of what he promised before, not noticing that he's not delivering anything except vengeance. So what we have here is a very difficult situation. So let me go back to Manfred. Manfred, do you agree that Russia is not a great place?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, how can you ask this question? It has not been a great place for almost 200 years. But we're not talking about the United States become Russia. And please, both of you, remember, the majority of Americans still believe in Trump, approve of what he has done so far. So please, we are not speaking here about a dictator imposing something against the people that is in arms against him. No, we have this, approval. So for that reason, what the Democrats have to do, and I still believe that they are alive, they are not dead. I mean, both of you seem to think that they have died a silent death. I think they are still alive, and I think the Democratic Party in Hawaii, especially with Schatz, Hirono, and Governor Green, at Case, I'm not so sure, have shown, their spine. And I think that will have an impact. This opposition, it may not be, very overwhelming at this point, but I think this will have an impact. So there is not a surrendering that you both seem to indicate, that everybody has surrendered to this autocrat and his oligarcho helpers, the Musk. I mean, one very funny thing, if it's not sick, is that Trump has now, as a result of being, in a way, educated or misinformed by Musk, he has now accused the South African regime for persecuting white Africans. And he has opened the possibility for any white South Africans who want to come to the United States that they will have there will be no barriers against it. Now, this is a very strange situation. I don't know which of the white South Africans he means, the Afrikaners or the English. And they are in disagreement, when you read some news reports about South Africa. But I mean, this fascist background of South Africa, African South Africa, is now represented by Musk in the White House, informing the president, who doesn't know anything about South Africa or most parts of the world anyway.
You could say that Musk is a racist.
Yeah,
A
he
lot
is.
of people feel that he is a racist, and
Yeah,
he is
He is.
raising racism in the White House.
Right.
But Manfred, let me ask you honestly: is there anything about the Trump government as we see it unfolding that you like, that you agree with, that you
No,
think is going to improve the country in some way?
no, nothing. I'm
I have
in
one.
that respect. I'm on your. I mean, I share your emotional critique, both of yours and Tim's, but I don't agree with some of or many of your detail.
Let me ask the bottom line question, Manfred. Are you concerned? Do you have any level of concern that we are moving into a dictatorship and we are going to be exhibiting the kinds of characteristics that Putin has achieved in Russia?
No, I do not think we will reach that point. I mean, I agree with you that you have this oligarchical, I would say, tendency we are moving towards, but I do not think that the United States will become a copy of Putin's Russia.
Are we moving in that direction?
Well, some.
Do you have any, Manfred, do you have any level of concern about it, or is it
Yes,
of no concern?
I'm concerned, yes. But look, I'm still not willing to emigrate.
Okay.
Even though I have a German passport,
Yeah.
I could do that easily. But I'm not. I have not reached that point of despair, total despair, that both.
Okay, so it would be concern. It would be concern, but
Yes.
not despair. Is that
Right.
okay? Is that a
Right.
correct statement of it?
Yes.
I have something that I would like to proclaim, and we could, make note of this. Donald Trump has done something that I fully approve of and have been waiting for decades to occur. Donald Trump, through executive order, has abolished the use of the United States penny. Here, here. So there it is. You have at least one executive order that I feel is more than worthwhile.
We're getting kind of off the track here.
Sorry.
Tim, how about your thoughts that you would like to leave with our audience on this question? And the question is, perhaps you want to live in Russia. It may be coming sooner than you think.
Okay. Well, I'm going back to Tucker Carlson's little extravaganza video film trip of Russia, Moscow, back in February of 2024. A video extravaganza that looked like it was sponsored from the Moscow Tourist Bureau of come to Moscow, you'll love it. Well, you know what? I was young enough to remember, the Red Scare. I was young enough to remember the fact that we are in fear of Russia. Maybe that has some influence on my thoughts. But Russia is not a place where I want to be. And I never subscribed to the Beatles song, Back in the USSR. There's too many restrictions of your freedom, too many shortages, too much oligarchy, too much bribery, too much lies, damn lies, and the people that perpetrate them. This is not a country I would want to live in. And also, the weather sucks.
Think we're going there?
Yeah, like I said, we're on the move, and we should be recognizing that which is taking place, not being an alarmist, but being an alarmist. Stop this at our border. Let's stop it now. Put a flashlight on this. Put a spotlight on it. So yes, I think we are on the move to living more of a Russian oligarchy, slash autocratic life. And I don't want to see that for my country. Am I ready to move? No.
Okay, Manfred, you want to take 1 minute and close? And you could mention about how careful you would be with beverages on an airplane.
No, I'm not. Look, I don't have to add anything. I simply recommend to you a book about Russia's takeover of the Ukraine by Katerina Gordieva. Take My Grief Away, Voices from the War in Ukraine. When you read that, this question that you asked, do you want to move to Russia, becomes obscene. I mean, that's what, as much as I loved visiting St. Petersburg, going to, the museums there. St. Petersburg is a lovely city. And Tim, one remarkable thing about St. Petersburg is you can still read at midnight in the summer in the streets. So it's a very enlightening, an enlightening experience. No, I don't want to live in Russia. I would have stayed. I would like to stay for a longer period in Ukraine. From Kiev, from Lemberg to Kiev to Odessa. I've been there and I admired the Ukrainians, and I am afraid, what may come their way if Trump meets Putin. I mean, in that sense, I'm scared of these possible interventions, in the international order by Trump visiting Putin, and I don't know, what will happen in Europe, how they will respond to that. I mean, at this point, I said the last time, one of the great things about Trump having become president is that it had brought Europeans closer together, including the Brits. But I don't know what would happen if he decides to leave NATO, if he decides to not continue supporting militarily with weapons and money the Ukraine. I don't know whether the Europeans will. I mean, you have opposition in Orban's Hungary and Slovakia, in other places. With what they will do. I mean, one sign will come in Sunday in a week, 23rd of February, when you have the elections in Germany. We will see what happens there. The ADF will not win, but they will be the second largest party, and that will make it difficult, to form a government.
Let me say that for me, I consider Russia a mean-spirited country. It has been a mean-spirited country for a long, long time, and
Right.
It is at least as mean today. It is not keeping up with decency or fairness or a rule of law or kindness to its people. That's not going to change. And we are headed down the same path here because that's what Trump is. He's an example of mean spirit and the opposite of decency and caring and kindness. We have so many indications of that. Let's not be straddled between how it was and how it might be, because if we go further down this road, we will be at a crossroads that we won't like. Thank you very much, Manfred Henningsen and co-host Tim Apicella. We'll see you again soon for the next show. Aloha.